So when I was around 10 years old, I heard that when you read a book in headstand, that everything goes straight into your memory. And also I can recall another little incident where I heard that when you keep your book under the pillow and sleep, that everything is grabbed into your head through the osmosis effect. It's a little funny, right? But did you know that most of the so-called productive study techniques and strategies which we try to follow and struggle to follow are actually equally ridiculous, like what I said already? Yeah, sometimes it looks so nice to practice them, but in the end, what we expect is the productive result. So if our plan was to make a movie, yeah, we can try them all out. But our plan is to get an A star or an A in your examinations. So for that, we have to take out the best study techniques for our routine and not the myths. In this video, we are going to expose and burst out some of the top study strategies and shed a lot of our tears and erase all the stress aside and make a realistic study routine ahead. So let's get started. Myth number 1 is the study routine time. So when we say the study routine time, in lot of the videos I've seen in many study tip channels was to study early in the morning. But did you know that Barack Obama used to write his speeches at night? And people like J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk, and Mark Zuckerberg are also night owls. So remember that we all have our own internal prime time. So there is no right for a person to say that the best time to study is early morning or late night. So if you are good with studying early morning, make your schedule to morning schedule. If you are good at studying at night, make your schedule as a night study routine. And there is this period like 3 to 6 p.m. which most of us feel bored and obviously we won't study. But there are people who are super productive at that time. So if you are one of them, go study at that time. Don't follow the myth that you have to get up in the morning every day to study. Myth number 2 is study till you get sick or study without sleeping. So in most of these beautiful movies which we see, some of the K-dramas and even some of the Hollywood movies, we see students studying with their full potential, studying day and night continuously without breaks and getting nosebleeds and sicknesses during their exams. And this has both plus and a negative effect for our mind. Because when we study, we feel like, okay, although it's difficult, we try to study harder and harder and harder. But what happens is, what we'll remember is not what we studied, but how hard it was to study. Isn't that relatable? So don't think that you need to study all day long for 10 hours, 12 hours a day. If you can do that, job well done. There is a way of doing that. You can study for 12 hours, you can study for 14 hours, but in a realistic study schedule, like having constant breaks and a proper study routine with small chunks of work. And this leads us to myth number 3. Myth number 3 is multitasking equals to multi-productivity. So most of us think that when we have to study a lot of things, to take constant breaks. Now this productive study method gets converted into a myth by the lack of understanding. Most of us, when we hear this, we'll be like, okay, then in the day I have to study all the 9 subjects. If you have 9, you're going to study all the 9 subjects in the day itself. Or else you struggle to study the entire book in one day. This is not going to work. What I mean is, for an example, imagine your mother asks you to do the dishes. What will you do? Will you wash one plate, then go cut the grass, wash another plate, play with the little puppy, then again wash another plate? Wait. If this goes on like that, it sounds a little ridiculous, like reading a book in headstand. So, what will you do? Won't you finish off the dishes first and then go to the next task? So same way, finish off one particular chapter or a concept properly and have a little break and go on to the next. When you say multitasking, it doesn't mean that you need to do 2-3 things at once. Like for an example, writing an essay and then in the meantime reading another book, then again keeping both that aside, doing some math. That's not going to work because this is a brain, right? Your brain needs some time to process. So let's give some time for our brain to process. Another bonus tip for this, maintain a good study and a sleep schedule because our mind tends to grab things with familiarity. For an example, if you tell your child not to touch some fire, you know it's going to burn your hand, right? So when you're small, the first time you just touch, you know it burns and you won't touch again. So it means even if you see a candlelight or a lamp, or even if there's a big bonfire, you know fire is not something to be touched. So same way, that is what your mind does. So when you have a fixed sleep and a study routine, your mind is free enough to know that this is the time you need to revise, this is the time you need to process. So by having a proper sleep cycle, your mind gets a proper time duration to process what you learn. And I'll make it a little bit easier to take things from your temporary memory into your permanent memory so that you won't forget the things and retain them for a longer period of time. Understanding equals to knowing. Most of us practice this passive study recall technique of reading the highlighted notes. This is indeed productive at your last minute of studies. Because when you have your exams tomorrow, you don't have time to do a lot of things. So what we tend to do is go through what we highlight. And even our teachers say to highlight the important points for a reason, right? So it doesn't mean that it's totally a myth, but let me tell where it becomes a myth. Most of us tend to just reread those highlighted points, highlighted marks, and just refer them out, without making them into an active recall process. This is how you need to convert it into an active recall process. If you have already done the highlighting parts in your book, go ahead and make a question for each highlighted area. For an example, if you can ask a definition from this particular keyword, write a question as define this particular keyword. So in that way, you can convert them into flashcards or mind maps or even just Q&As, questions and answers, and make this passive recall technique into an active recall technique. Next myth is called desirable difficulties. Desirable difficulties means that when we have things which are more hard for us, we tend to put them aside and just go through more with the easier stuff. This is good to start up a study session. That means if you want to start up a study session when you don't feel motivated enough, you can go through what you already know and then get the punch to go ahead. But it doesn't mean that you need to always go through what you know and keep aside the parts which you don't know. But our brain is very tricky and makes us do what is easier for us. So be more mindful when you select what you're going to do in your productive study session. I will give you another tip for this. Imagine you have a 6-hour study routine. Keep 3 hours for learning a new concept, 2 hours for doing questions and marking answers, and 1 hour for daily routine study session, which means this is the time period where you're going to recap whatever you did within the day and also revise the concepts which you've already learned. So it's something like a light study session. Mind tends to remember what is more familiar for us. So it leads us to the next myth, that is isolate your brain before starting a study routine. So I've heard this in another video which I watched on YouTube, saying to refresh your whole memory, and not refresh actually, to erase everything in your mind and start up with a blank page. This is not good because I've tried it out as well and it's not good. Because what happens is when you learn something new, if you can link it to a concept which you already know, there's a bigger possibility of it being retained in your memory for a longer period of time. So for that, if you can link something, I'll give you an example. Imagine we're off to school, and on the first day of school, you meet this girl called Mary. And you're like, she says, I'm Mary. And I'm like, okay, she's Mary. Then again, you see her tomorrow, and you know, oh, that's Mary. And then again, you see someone on the road, and her name is also Mary. So you'll be like, Mary, oh, I have another Mary in school too. See, that is called active recall. So in this method, you won't ever forget her name, right? That is how we remember simple things. So same way, don't make your mind total blank. And that is why I say not to start in a blank page. Next myth is copywriting equals to better note taking. So most of us, when we say writing short notes or making our notes, tend to copyright the important points or the definitions given in our textbooks or our lectures notes. I did a social test for this as well. I asked for my friends what are the ways you implement to make your short notes. So they were like, the teachers say that these points are important. So I take a piece of paper and write them down. Guys, that's not practical, because what happens is there might be words which are with elaborated vocabulary or a little bit profound words which you don't know the meanings. And what happens is you don't understand the concept but memorize. So when you give your priority to memorize, it will go into your memory for a short period of time, but it won't remain for a long period of time. So remember that this is the 21st century, and most of the time these days examinations are not only based on studying the theoretical concepts. Now what they test is not that you've studied, but whether you have understood the concept. So understand the concept and write down your short notes in your own words. There are a few words which you can't replace, like names of places or dates or people who invented. Yeah, true, you need to memorize them. Other than that, if you can convert those profound definitions into simple bullet points and study them, you can get a better result. This leads us to the next myth, that is memorizing equals to studying. So most of us take the memorized points into a big sheet of paper and we are like, we have to memorize this. This means this means this, and just parrot talk. It's not going to retain in your memory for a long time period. So stop parrot talking and understand the concept without only focusing on memorizing the concept. Because if you understand the concept and practice active recall, it will go into your memory without much effort. Next, we come to the next myth. That is, longer study sessions or long hours of study equals to longer memory period. Let's take this for an example. Don't we often see on YouTube, Instagram or Pinterest saying about like 14 hours study sessions with me, 24 hours productive study routine, whole night, back to back, morning routine, night routine, and all these videos. And what happens is when we see them, we tend to blindly follow, saying, okay, she studied for 14 hours a day. Okay, then you just grab all the books, all the necessary materials, sit in the junk and start reading the book from A to Z without even having a small break, which is not practical once again. Because if you don't have breaks, which most of us mock at saying, she takes too much of breaks and it's a lot of waste of time, why not studying everything at once and taking a long break? This is not practical, guys, because your mind needs a break, although you don't want it. Like, for an example, when you just start studying for long hours, haven't you noticed you're getting distracted? And this is where Pomodoro study method comes into being. So this method is pretty much productive when you have to study lots of chunks. Therefore, break your tasks into chunks of work and properly cater them to your own level. Which means if you can study for 3 hours at a stretch, make your study routine for 3 hours, not a minute more. So there is something like this. productivity is equal to quality over quantity. So if you focus on the quality, please forget the quantity. If you are focusing on the quantity, please forget the quality. So this is what I mean. Just think that you need to remember one exact chapter in your lesson. Why not breaking them into subheadings and study one concept at a time? Do one concept, take a short break. Another concept, short break. Another concept, short break. And finally, take all the concepts as a summary and read them at once and put them into your main mind map. Because mind maps is a big time saver at your exam. If you can make these mind maps from these small chunks, what will happen is you will have a good connection in what you learn. Because most of us go wrong when we say study concepts separately. We tend to study this concept separately, and then when we go to the exam, we're like, wait, what? Because what they do is most of the time they connect concepts together and give you questions. So you should know the connection between these concepts, which leads us to that method I told about, this active recall. So when you can study one concept, and if there are related concepts, do refresh your memory about those concepts when you study this concept. You can do this and find the relationship between concepts by going through the marking schemes of the papers, which means your past papers, and also the time saving and the biggest gift given in your textbooks. Behind your textbooks, there will be a summary or a set of questions. Now, in advanced levels, some universities, you all might not be having this. So for this, you can actually go through the past series of question papers and your model or the mock papers given by your teachers or the lecturers. The last, but not the least, myth is setting huge goals. Setting huge goals also comes from this point of the study with me sessions. So when you say study with me for 14 hours, we're like, okay, today I'm going to complete studying 14 hours. And you feel like I'm going to study this entire book within the day. And they're like, you can do it, you can like manage it up. But there are times that some lessons are pretty long and they need more time. And sometimes there are lessons which are pretty short and won't even take 2 hours to complete. So therefore, know the value or the weight of each concept before you consider how it is to be done. And divide time according to how it is to be given, not according to a just strict formula saying 3 hours or 4 hours or 2 hours. This brings us to the end of the video. Comment down below which was the myth that you've been following for a long period of time and stop, or another myth which you would like to expose to the world. And this will make someone feel less lonelier. Thank you so much for watching this till the end. And if you like our work, leave a like, subscribe and share. Thank you, and let's meet again next week.